right, everybody. I want to welcome you to another Wednesday night edition of Conversations with Cougars. And I know you guys recognize the gentleman who's my guest tonight. I've been looking forward to this for a few weeks now. Jinsue Park. Good evening, Jinsue. We've been having a good little chat. How are you tonight?
Oh, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. This is great.
Oh, it's going to be fantastic. And folks are going to be rolling in here in just a minute or two, and we'll be able to share some good times. But Jinsue is part of a family with at least three Northview graduates in the 80s and early 90s. I knew his sisters, older sister Susan, younger sister Lisa. They were on either side of me growing up, and Jinsue was several years behind, but I always knew of him because if anybody knew the Park family back in the day, they were such a warm and generous family and such a great addition to Dothan. And we're going to get into all those things that don't include playing football at Northview, so many other great things. But Jinsue, before we jump back in our time machine, let's talk about the current. I know you're in Marietta. Tell folks a little bit about what you do and your beautiful family.
So I'm married. Her name is Stephanie. It'll be 20 years in 2022. Two kids, twins, actually, Avery and Connor. She's at volleyball practice right now. He's in band. They will be freshmen going into Walton High School here in Marietta. I've worked in the biotech, biopharma space for the last 20 plus years. I owned a restaurant for a short period of time. Pretty much all of my family, Susan and Lisa, now live here, so they just followed me.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things you guys don't know, and this is where I really want to head into this, is the Park family has been involved in taekwondo forever. And there's so many wonderful stories. I hope we can fit it all in the next 58 minutes. But Jinsue, let's start with maybe either your parents or your grandparents and a little bit of history, because I know you moved here, you moved to the States, moved to Alabama when you were a real young kid. But tell just a little bit of the family history before coming to Alabama.
So my father he flew the F-86 in Korea for the military when he left the military academy, and he also was an attorney there too. And so he was involved in the Korean CIA, and so that's how he actually came to this country, was on a shared program.
Wait, I'm going to pause you because we're going to have to come back to that story alone, because I know we'll have to do that another time. Your father, Korean CIA, is a whole nother story. I know. So please go back to where you were. But I was like, okay, go for it.
He did a lot. He actually came to this country because if you have your pilot's license here, you can go anywhere. So that was his goal, is to get his pilot's license here and then go back to Korea. Well, as you know, life doesn't work out the way you want. And he had two young girls first and then myself. And he realized that in order for them to have the best life, it would be here in the United States. So he decided to make it work here. So he was a test pilot, a commercial pilot here. Southern Airways, now it's called Southwest. But when all the pilots from Vietnam returned, the pilot pay reduced. So in his 40s, he went back to school and trained on helicopters. And that's how we ended up in Fort Rucker, because Fort Rucker was the largest helicopter-based training center for the Army. So we actually lived in Enterprise for many years. I actually was born in Texas. But when we moved to Enterprise, they decided that, moving to Dothan was the bigger city and the schools might be a little bit better. So we moved to Dothan, and that's how we ended up staying there.
Well, on behalf of the citizens of Dothan, we are glad that your family moved a little bit further east to Houston County.
Oh, yeah.
So how old were you when you moved to Dothan?
I think I was around like 4,
right.
Maybe 3 or 4.
So we're talking very early 80s, late 70s, early 80s is when all this is going on.
Correct.
Okay.
And right from the get-go, got involved in a a lot of sports, and I think that's what really opened a lot of doors. I think for boys to be included in their club, if you're good at sports, you're included or accepted anywhere. And Dothan had a great program for a lot of different sports, from baseball, soccer, and I played all those all throughout.
And what part of town did you grow up in? Where was your home, family home?
So the first house, I believe, was closer to the Dothan Airport.
Okay. Napier, out by Napier Field on
Road a little bit.
Mhm.
And then we eventually moved to Murphy Mill.
Okay.
Old Mill restaurant was, so down the road from there.
Sure. And I think the Old Mill Restaurant is still there. I don't know what version of it is there, but I think it's still in operation.
Well, the small world is my next door neighbor works with Stacy. And his parents own the Old Mill,
Gotcha.
but they sold it. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. So you grew up in that part of the city, and you were what, in elementary school, I guess, about this time?
Yes, I went to Girard Elementary. Also went to Girard Middle. I did do 1 year in Augusta Raw in Tallahassee.
Oh, okay.
And started freshman year at Northview. And throughout that, I competed heavily through taekwondo all throughout my life.
Well, let's talk about that. Were older generations in your family part of taekwondo, or were you the first person? Because I know there's some good stories there.
So Grandmaster Kiwan Kim was my father's instructor. And when my father actually was born in Japan, his uncles were an electrician and a dentist. And so they were there. And so for the first 10 years of his life, he knew Japanese language. But through the Korean War, afterwards they moved, before that they moved back to Korea. Well, he was getting beaten up at school a lot because he came from a different part of the world.
Sure.
So he sought out Grandmaster Kiwan Kim, and martial arts back then was not built for kids. And so he tried to train him as hard as he could so that he would quit, because at the time it was only adults. But that only, furthered his want to learn.
Well, how old was your father at that time?
So when he sought him out, he was 12.
Oh, so he really was a child.
He was,
Wow.
And through that connection, he kept that hobby up throughout. And so when he first immigrated in California, that's where he first met a lot of folks in martial arts. And he and Chuck Norris actually started to practice a little together.
And guys, you need to see the pictures that Jinsue sent to me that I posted. You're going to see some really great taekwondo pictures there, including Chuck Norris and also a belt as well. But continue, please. I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. So he was in California, and he was a student at UCLA. And as you would do, he was doing martial arts in California and flying, and eventually Texas and Wisconsin because of flying, being an aviator. And then once he finished flying, that's when he decided, I want to open up chains of martial arts schools, or open a martial arts school. And it eventually built to 7.
And that's really when I think you guys came on at least my radar, was in the 80s in Dothan I knew that your older sister was certainly participating, Susan. I assume that Lisa was as well, and I know you were. But how much of the sport was your life? Meaning, was it a pretty casual thing, or was it very, very important to your family? And really, after school, you went there. Before school, you went there. Weekends and those kind of things.
So I probably trained 6 or 7 days a week. In middle school, and as a freshman, I was on the U.S. Junior Olympic team. So even as a freshman and sophomore, and partly through high school, I traveled to many different countries. The funny thing is, I used to, Phil Hardy had a hard time of me leaving so much because I missed a lot of school. So I always brought back a coffee cup from whatever country I competed in, and I made sure I gave it to him. I also had to do a journal and do some schoolwork, but that always made up for it. Statutes of limitations are here, so I'm sure I'm okay.
Long gone. Say what you need.
Yeah, so I competed heavily in many ways, and that helped me tremendously in football.
Well, we're gonna get to that intersection, but before we keep going, Jinsue, we got a whole bunch of teammates and classmates who want to say hello to you. We got Damon Glasgow. He said, "Do you remember the party at Kevin's house?" And we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Jason Mullins says, "What's up, buddy?" And let's see, he was very, very thankful that you moved out of Enterprise to Dothan. Tim Bright, thank you, Tim. I knew you'd know, buddy, that the old mill is still there. And Jason wants you to know that he still looks better than you do. I don't know what that, no, he says that you're looking good. But let's talk a little bit about you and starting to kick. Oh, and Shirley C. Again, Miss C's always there for us. We love that. She says, "Go Knowles," says
Well, I was kicking a soccer ball in the summer, I think prior to ninth grade. And I don't know if I was at a HA's football field, because I know Coach Parrish lived around there at the time. And he saw me kick a soccer ball. And I don't know if most people know this, but the sweet spot on a soccer ball is about the size of a $50 or maybe a silver dollar. But the sweet spot on a football is about the size of a dime. So you have to be a little more accurate and know exactly where you're striking the ball. Well, he saw me kick the soccer ball, and he came out with 3 footballs, and he made me kick those 3. And he said, "Let me talk to your father." So he knew exactly the source of where he needed to go to talk, who to talk with. And that's kind of how it began, just kicking soccer balls. And he saw it, and he said, "Well, can you do this one?"
Well, let's talk a little bit about the intersection of the two sports. Of course, taekwondo, it's probably as much mental discipline as it is physical, or maybe even more. And kicking, the art of kicking, also quite mental. Maybe most folks don't realize, but I've had several kickers on. Jack Martin was just on. We had Brian Jackson. I had the Lopez brothers. We've got Kobe coming up in a few weeks. We've had some awesome kickers come through Northview over the years. And I love to hear about the mental aspect of kicking. But talk about, is there crossover between taekwondo and kicking, or how did you use that when you kicked?
To be a good kicker, I think requires the muscle memory and repetition. And when you practice anything, whether it's taekwondo or gymnastics or whatever sport at a high level, repetition is key. And persevering, even when you're injured or if you've missed a kick. They do say you want to have a short memory. What I believe is you need to remember what you did, maybe possibly incorrectly, to change or fix. And then when you go back out, really focus. And I think the focus is key thing whenever you're striking a ball, exactly where you want to do it, how you want to do it. Leg whip, flexibility is key. I think flexibility helped me tremendously in football because of taekwondo. I don't know if other kickers have talked about the flexibility part, but you do have to keep warm and flexible. But just the mental aspect of it would be to constantly, you're talking to yourself. And at times, every coach feels like they're your kicking coach. And then sometimes there's not a person on the team that understands what you need to be thinking through as far as progression. So getting yourself ready when you see the ball cross the 50-yard line and going through repetitions and going through progressions and mentally focusing yourself on timing. I can't tell you, Tracy Knowles and Ryan Hicks, Tracy was the snapper, Ryan was the holder, and they were great. They made my job so much easier, and the guys who blocked. Yeah.
Well, I know that you're as accomplished as you are in many things in life. I also know that you're a humble guy. And although we're talking about you, I know that you bring along your teammates, and that was the kind of guy you were then. And I suspect that's the kind of guy you've always been, just from some of the comments that I'm reading coming through here. But Jinsue, as you started your journey as a field goal kicker, how is that impacting your sport of taekwondo? Were you able to maintain both, or did taekwondo have to give way to kicking for a while?
So during the season, my father, after football practice, I actually went to the taekwondo center and practiced another 2 hours. So I didn't get home until 9:30 or 10 during the weekday during football season, then homework. And that's probably why a lot of teachers were always concerned why I was sleeping sometimes in class. I was able to keep up, but when you're training that many hours every day, and training taekwondo was Saturday and Sunday as well.
What
Still business,
Sure. What I should have asked, though, the better question would have been, talk to us, share with us, if you will, if you're comfortable in doing so, about your family conversations about allowing you to play another sport and how that was going to impact your taekwondo track.
So I really had to sell it, but I think Coach Parrish did a great job setting the baseline for my father to understand. Football dominates here in the South, and he felt like I had a skill that was valuable to the team and that could contribute. And I felt like it would be an opportunity for me to play another sport and to learn something and grow in that as well. But how did that conversation go? At first, it wasn't a good conversation because he didn't want me to pull away because I was competing heavily around the country in taekwondo. But I will say the strength training that I got from Coach Ryan helped tremendously in what I was doing because they were weight classes. And through strength training, I was able to do more than what most martial artists could do. And I think my father started to realize, I had a passion to do both. And as long as I kept my grades up, that he was okay for me to do both. But I could never miss practice in anything. So I would stay late. Yeah.
Well, one of your former teammates, now superintendent of schools in Ozark, Revis Gertman.
Oh, Revis.
He was very impressed that you kept your grades up as well. It's one thing to have a full-time class load, and I'm sure you didn't take the easiest of classes in high school. It's another thing to add in training 6 or 7 days a week of taekwondo. Then on top of that, you had football season. At some point you slept, ate, maybe even had a little bit of a social life. But at what point did you have any, or did you ever have any downtime in high school?
No, I enjoyed every bit of it. I was busy with a lot of things, and I even had a side job, worked at Davis movie theaters on weekends.
When?
At night, But, I loved just doing things. And so playing football and building friendships. And, when you sweat and bleed together, you really build a bond. And I really appreciate that. Even to today, Jason Mullins and I will still talk several times a year. So those bonds never go away.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the life of a kicker. You're not out there knocking heads. You're not catching passes. You're not tackling people. You're kicking. You're working on your craft. Sometimes it's just you and that odd looking tee that you can hold the ball by yourself on the ground. Or maybe you got the holder and the snapper with you. But 98% of each practice, it's just you.
Right.
And then Coach Parrish says, let's line up. And you better get over there and if you ever miss. So talk about that, and you becoming a teammate or being a teammate? How did you get into that and become so close with those guys?
Again, I think when you can contribute and they see that you can score points, and I rarely missed inside the 35, really the 40. And I remember one time at practice, not a very good practice for whatever reason. I don't know what it was. I was in my own world.
Mhm.
And he called special teams, and it was the end of practice. And he said, "If you make it, we don't run tonight. But if you miss, we're going to run more."
Huh?
That was probably more pressure than any of the playoff games I've ever had. By him saying that the blue on a Tuesday or Wednesday, which really wasn't a kicking day.
Yeah, because you had about 90 guys looking at you and wanting to do nothing but go straight into the locker room.
Bad because they were sweating and dirty, and here I am. My uniform's clean and pristine, and I'm just off kicking. But in the very beginning, I did play a little wide receiver, but I think I got hurt once and I couldn't kick well. And at that point, Coach Parrish said, "No, you're too valuable to get hurt and for you not to be able to go out and kick. So let's just stop playing charades, and you're not going to play wide receiver anymore at all, not even scout team."
Smart move by the head coach. Now,
kicking at that time, I think he realized, I think the year before, there were a lot of games that were very close due to kicks. And so very few coaches in the country at that time thought of kicking as a true way to, try to win games. But over time, you start to realize offense, defense, special teams, it's just a third, and a third.
Yep. It clearly has been that way now for 25 years, but you're right. But what I want to talk about is the memorable kicks in games, the good and the bad, because they're all memorable.
So the very first game, I want to say, is Colquitt County, my junior year. It was a little higher snap, but Ryan was able to grab it and pull it down. And at that point, I wasn't even sure if he was going to call fire. But as soon as he pulled it down, he was so quick. Ryan was so good with his hands. And as soon as he pulled it down, we scored the first 3 points of that year with a kick. And I knew that at that point, okay, this isn't too bad. But couple games later on, Bainbridge, I think I had 3 field goals in that one game. But then at the end of the year for playoffs, I remember when we played Viger, it was 3 overtimes, but I had at least 3 field goals as well.
Yeah, one of the more memorable games in Northview history, frankly. Always playing the Mobile area schools came down to kicks almost every game, good or bad. My senior year, we beat Fairhope in the semifinals. Clark Lopez kicks a overtime field goal that sends us to the state championship game. But just as many as we've got those, there's also lots of memorable games that weren't good kicks. And I know we got to talk about it. So let's go ahead and let's just dive into your final game.
So we arrive at, I think it's Ladd Stadium.
This is the fall of 91, season of 91?
90.
90, okay.
And we were playing Murphy. And as we drove up, I realized the field was way different because the goalposts were college goalposts. Well, can you imagine if you practice shooting hoops in a regular standard basketball hoop, and all of a sudden at playoffs, they decide to shrink the hoop up a little bit, like at the fair or at Six Flags?
Right. Now, high school, do you remember the dimensions, the difference in high school versus college for the width of the field goals back then?
It's 23 feet and like 5 inches. And then college is 18 feet, 6 inches, something like that. So it's 5 feet.
Yeah, it's a good 5-6 feet more narrow for college.
Correct.
And you hadn't kicked on one of those fields or those field goals all year, had you?
Never. That was my first time.
Oh, you mean even for your career, you had not?
Never kicked at a college goalpost before. And even before the game started, I went and found Coach Parrish, and I let him know what the difference was. And he just said, don't worry about it, go back out. And the reason 5 years later, we talked about it again. And I said, did you know those were college goalposts? And he goes, what? Are you kidding? And I said, no. He had just, I think, gotten sick behind the bleachers and his ears were ringing.
Yeah. Yeah.
He couldn't hear what I was saying.
Right.
But the kicks that I missed, it shaved the posts on both sides. And I overcompensated. So here's the thing too, at a college field, the hash marks are outside the goalpost so that the angles are much more it is much more of a different look. So
as a side note, next time you guys go to games, if you've never noticed where the hash marks are, if you've got college, pro, or high school playing on the same field, well, you wouldn't have pro, but college or in high school, a lot of times both play at the same or can play at the same park. You'll notice two sets of hash marks that go down the line. And that indicates if a ball goes out of bounds on the right side of the field, the ball is going to be set on the closest hash mark. And sometimes that doesn't line up. And this is what Jinsue's saying. It doesn't line up with the field goal posts.
So when they're on the outside of the post and the angles are much different, then the linemen have to line up differently. The snap is a little different. Even the holder has to change. So my angle is a little different. And when you look at, when I remember that night, it was windy. It was very cold. It was 30 degrees. So I was angling for the top right quadrant so I could have a natural hook going from right to left. As I kicked, the wind stopped. And I noticed too that the ground was very wet and slick, so I couldn't plant as hard as I normally would. So I may have pushed it to the right, but it was also foggy and it just shaved the pole. Had that been a high school goalpost, we would have moved on to the semis.
Had we been at Rip Hughes, you'd have moved on to the semis.
Correct.
Now, fast forward, well, at that time in the fall of 90, Josh Parrish and Hunter Parrish, Coach Harry Wayne Parrish's sons, had been and were the ball boys for years. They were always on the sidelines. You guys probably remember them from back in the day. And Josh has told us, he's told us on this show, he's told me in person, he was underneath the goal when that kick went through. And he would swear on everything that he can swear upon that that kick was a good kick that night. But alas, it wasn't, according to the refs.
Well, it was higher than the poles. So the angle of where the ref was standing is hard to tell because the ball, I tried to kick it as high as I could to get over the line, which was higher than the posts were too. So it's hard to tell.
It's kind of like sometimes with the when a ball is hit in baseball and it goes over the foul pole, and sometimes the umpires who are running down there, they don't have the best of angles and they just have to make a judgment call. Well, I hope that enough time has passed. It's been 30, going on 31 years. I know it's still somewhat of a fresh wound, Jinsue, but there are lessons to be learned in anything we do in life. And I'm sure at some time you probably have or will share the lessons from that kick, either with your children or maybe your taekwondo students. So what did you learn? What did you take from that?
Do your best, and you have to move forward and not worry about that situation. Because, everyone in life will fall down. It is a travesty if you don't find your way back up. And I thought long and hard about that. And, a lot of people, a lot of folks around town, a lot of my teammates, a lot of teachers, a lot of people supported me so much on that. And I can't thank them enough. And I mean, it was a whole team. Everyone was hurting. But it was a situation where I learned and grew and learned more about myself, about how you come back. Because the following year, even though we lost the first game, the second game, I think we won, and it was by a kick. So,
well, we were going to get to that. We're going to get to that. And Jinsue, I will tell you that Brandy Birdsong Bortak, She swears that that kick was a good kick. She knows that it was. And all right, I have to ask. Mullins says to ask you, what time did y'all get home from that Murphy game?
What was it, 4 a.m?
Was the sun coming back up at that point?
Yeah. I do remember the next night we went out and we had a good talk.
Well, it is. It's amazing how sports can, I've said this many, many times, sports, whether it's in person or on television, is the best of reality life, because there's winners and then there are people or teams that just come up a little short, but then the next week it could be reversed completely. So take us to the next season. I want to know what happened the next season for you.
Well, as we all know, Coach Parrish went to, I want to say he went to
Early County, I believe.
right. So Coach Whitcomb came in, and you know, we had a lot of talent on that team, and you know, Kevin Jackson the year before when I was a junior was our punter, and I practiced hard at punting, so that added that. So I had to the better athlete had to take over the punting duty. Sorry, Kevin. I'm kidding. No, Kevin was playing linebacker and running back, and he was doing everything. And the coaches were trying to figure out where he could get rest. So when I started to punt and I could get the ball turned over with a spiral, that's when they realized, okay, well, let's have him punt.
Well, clearly you caught the attention of the college coaches, because not only did you play ball at one school, but then you ended up at another school. So share a little bit about your recruitment and how you made some decisions about playing in college.
So Mickey Andrews was one of the defensive coordinators at Florida State, and he was from the Enterprise area. And, you know, I went to camp at Florida State a couple times, and that's when they started to recruit. Other schools started to recruit, but, you know, at the time, FSU was having a lot of kicking situations. So I thought that might be a great fit. Once I got there, I realized that one of the kickers, Scott Bentley, out of Colorado, who should have gone to Notre Dame on signing day, switched over to Florida State. So that put me even one more person behind. So then I transferred to East Tennessee State and played with Jason Mullins. We had a great it was a great opportunity, and really enjoyed kicking there as well. But through that year, I realized that as much as I enjoyed kicking and wanted to contribute, that I really wanted to focus on college, on academics.
And all during this time, during your college years, did you continue to compete in Taekwondo?
I did. So when I transferred back to Florida State, I started a Taekwondo club. And through that, went to the National Collegiate Championships and represented Florida State. And I was a middleweight contender. And the tournament at that time was at NYU. And I think I had somewhere between 5 or 6 fights that one day, and ended up as a silver medalist for Florida State.
Wow.
At the college ranks.
Now, you're getting to be, forgive me for saying this, you're becoming a middle-aged man. And as we all do, the athlete in us still remains here, but it may not remain anywhere else. And I know you still train, I know you still teach, but do you still compete?
Oh, no. No. I had to stop that back in around 1996. Actually, Taekwondo was in the Olympics in 88 and 92. Funnily enough, in 1996, when it was here in Atlanta, they took the sport of Taekwondo out and replaced it with a different sport for that one time. But then it went back in 2000, and it's been in there since. That was a perfect year because I was 23. And you never know what's going to happen. So I didn't want to wait another 4 years. Because when you train, you know, 3 times a day. Everything is around training. So I have the utmost respect for those that can keep going and keep doing it, but your body just takes a toll.
Now, are you still training 6 or 7 days a week, or have you cut back a little bit?
Twice a week, sometimes once a week. Yeah.
And what about your children or your wife? Have they picked up the sport?
So my children are first degree black belts now, and my wife just got her black belt about a year ago.
Excellent. Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, it is, I'm sure, it has provided many benefits to you throughout your life and your family as well. And you certainly have traveled all over the world as a result of participating in Taekwondo.
I've been very fortunate, Bernard, in many ways, and very lucky. But I also believe that when you do work hard and you strive, sometimes luck comes your way too. And I was very fortunate to be in Dothan, where, you realize sports is very much supported in the youth level, and I think that helped out tremendously too.
Well, your sisters also participated in Taekwondo, but they were, in addition, they were cheerleaders at Northview. And yep. As you said earlier, it's the way for any child coming into high school to immediately find their group of friends, potentially belonging to groups. That's why you join different groups, whether it's academic oriented or chess or whatever it may be. And that's what I want to ask you about. I know we're kind of moving around a little bit, guys. I'm talking with Jinsue Park, and I'm just so glad to catch up with him and learn more about his story. And so many of his teammates are watching in the audience with some great comments. And Jinsue, what I want to ask you is, even though you had been at Girard before coming to Northview, when you were at Girard, did you at that point, you'd been in Dothan several years, obviously, Girard Elementary, et cetera. But before you came over to the big high school, both your sisters had gone through or were there. I can't remember, was Lisa a senior your freshman year, or were y'all there at the same time? Okay. All right, so it's the age difference between me and Rob. I was a senior, Rob's freshman year. Now, a side note, did Lisa allow you to talk in the car on the ride to school from home in the mornings?
That's, I always wanted to get there a little earlier, and she was always late. Did we talk? Yeah, we talked.
No. Not talk to each other. Talking at all. Because I had a rule that Rob and Chase Letcher, who I drove, he was my next door neighbor, and Rob's class, I wouldn't let him talk. I wasn't a morning guy. I was a jerk as a senior to my younger brother. But there was no talking in that 12-minute drive to the school.
It was silent. In fact, Rob must have learned that, because when I rode with him when I was a freshman and he was a senior going to 2-a-day practices, there was no talking in the car. It was him, Gray, Harrison, I believe, and Ryan Hicks.
Well, I guess that's my way of Jinsue, of apologizing to you all these years later. I guess he picked it up from me. So I hope the statute is run and we can still be friends going forward. Well, Jinsue, we've got just a few more minutes, but I want to talk about, do you still enjoy the game of football, or did things at the end of your high school or college careers, sometimes you get it out of your system. There was about a 10-year period after I graduated playing at Vanderbilt. I didn't like the sport. I was done with it. I didn't go to games. I rarely watch games, but other guys are still completely involved in it this many years later. What was your take after you graduated college about the sport?
So when I moved to Atlanta, in the Atlanta area, I actually walked up to North Cobb High School, and I lived near them. And when I used to run around the track, I would watch the special teams and the place kickers. And I started to help them. And the head coach was like, "Have you ever played before?" And when I explained who I was, interesting enough, the offensive line coach at ETSU was the high school head coach's roommate in college.
Small world.
When I did a kick, he was like, "Oh yeah, you played." And so I started to help his kickers a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so I've always enjoyed the sport. In fact, when my mother started to understand football when I was in high school, mm-hmm. she didn't understand why one guy got behind another guy to receive a football. She asked so many questions. Uh-huh. She goes, "Why does he get behind the other guy? What is the reason for that?" So I got her a book, Football for Dummies, and she read it so many times. She knew every rule. So when she went to the games, she probably knew the rules better than most.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's funny to see the perspective of someone watching the game for the first time to try to understand why there's a center and a quarterback and why do they flip the ball in between one person's legs to the other person.
Oh, it's completely bizarre. It really, I can understand that a little bit. But so you stayed with the sport. Are you still a fan today?
There are aspects of it that I cringe a little bit.
Mhm.
And everyone, I guess, learns different things from it. And I still have great memories through football.
Mhm.
I know sometimes it gets a bad rap in some ways.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think it's evolving just like every sport is. And we'll find a happy medium of what's acceptable and what's not.
Mhm.
But no, I've always had a love for it.
Well, how's that flexibility? How are those hips? How are those hamstrings these days?
Very lucky. I can still do kicks to the face, and if I have to, and I train with my nephew. He's 24 now. Actually, he's at UVA Law School.
Good for him.
We trained last week, and he keeps me in line.
Now, when's the last time you kicked a ball to try to make field goals?
Probably 4 or 5 years ago. The footballs have changed tremendously. The high school ball is different from the college ball, and the college ball is actually different from the pro ball. In fact, years and years ago, I had a tryout with the Jaguars, Jacksonville Jaguars. I wasn't able to make it, but when you kick those different level ball, it's all a little different on the pressure and how long it is, on how the length of the ball is. Even the high school ball today is different. So,
well, we're not going to pressure you to providing us with a here's how I kick now video. We'll let you off the hook there, unless you really want to send us one. But I want you to share a little bit of that experience about trying out for the Jaguars.
they had just started, and I wrote in and I said I had played college, and they were just, I think every year professional teams are looking to just see what's out there. And at the time, I had to make a choice if I was going to either try out for that team or stay with the career path that I was on. I had a meeting to attend, and the person I spoke with said, well, you have a choice. If you go try out, we're going to have to let you go in this. I know I could do the skill, but I know, professional football, it is a total business. And would I want to do it and change teams? Because I know a lot of friends who do kick, and they'd be on 4 or 5 different teams in a year. And it can be somewhat harsh on their families and the state as well.
Yeah, you see some of these kickers, it's very rare for the kickers, the real specialty guys, to be some of them will be in the league 15 or more years. And if they're lucky, even the Adam Vinatieri's of the world didn't stay with just one team. They'll either get traded, their contracts are too high, or whatever it may be, or the next guy up is what they say in the league. But I'm sure that you made the very wisest of decisions. I'm sure it was very hard at the time to, it was time to give up that part of your life, so to speak, and to move on to things that would be not just for the next 4 years, but for the next 40 or so years.
Right.
But so, gosh, I sure thank you for spending some time with me tonight and sharing a little bit of your story and reliving some of those great memories.
I really appreciate this, Bernard. I think this is great what you're doing. It brought back some great memories, and I treasure them. I'll treasure them forever. And I know both of our families are close to each other, and hopefully, I do want to reach out to Robert soon. After one of the hard games, he actually wrote me a 3-page letter, and it let me know how much he understood and was trying to be supportive. So,
well, Rob was very close with your sister Lisa back in the day and for many, many years. And he probably viewed you as a little brother, a younger brother at the time.
I couldn't talk in the car, you know.
That's right. That's right. Well, Jinsue, again, thank you, bud. It was good to catch up with you and share some time.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Certainly, certainly. And guys, as we do every Wednesday night, 7 o'clock Central, it's Conversations with Cougars. We got a whole bunch more lined up in the upcoming weeks. Keep sending in your pictures, videos, memorabilia, whatever you got. And also, I'm continuing to work on the two lists. It's those who played, whether you're walk-on or scholarship, it doesn't matter, those who played in college. And it's becoming a pretty impressive list. So there's, I don't know how many, there's probably close to 100 names on there now. There's many more names that need to be added, is particularly in the last 15, 20 years. And then we've also got a running list for those who cheered in college as well. And that list is growing. So please find those. Please keep putting those comments in there. This is what makes this a lot of fun. Y'all have a safe rest of your week. We'll catch you next Wednesday night with Conversations with Cougars. Good night.